The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive station that housed the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Inside the Great Hall, representatives from a dozen different species sat in their assigned seats. The air hummed with translation devices as alien voices discussed the fate of a dead world. Commander Tae Yang stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Defiance, watching the council meeting through intercepted transmissions. His weathered face showed no emotion, but his hands gripped the railing hard enough to make his knuckles white. He was 47 years old, but he looked older. 3 centuries of survival in the dark spaces between stars had a way of aging a bloodline. "They're dividing up Earth," Lieutenant Hana said quietly from her station. She was young, barely 25, with bright eyes that had never seen humanity's homeworld. "The Dravix Empire wants the helium-3 reserves. The Vesh Collective is claiming the rare metals in the mantle." Tae Yang said nothing. He simply watched as the reptilian Dravix ambassador stood on his hind legs, his scales catching the artificial light. The ambassador's voice was rough and dismissive. "The humans are extinct. This is known fact. The solar flare of 300 cycles ago destroyed their civilization. We propose the immediate strip mining of the 3rd planet. The resources will be divided according to standard salvage protocols." The insectoid representative from the Vesh Collective clicked its mandibles in agreement. "Our surveys show no life signs. No orbital structures. No communications. The planet is a tomb. We waste time with this debate." Other council members nodded or made their species-equivalent gestures of agreement. To them, Earth was nothing more than an abandoned treasure chest waiting to be opened and emptied. Captain Jiwoo stood beside Tae Yang, her arms crossed over her chest. She was in her 30s, compact and muscular, with scars on her hands from a lifetime of combat training. "How much longer do we wait?" she asked. "They're talking about drilling into our planet like it's a piece of meat." "Soon," Tae Yang replied. "Let them show their true faces first. Let the galaxy see what they really are." Far below in the ship's engineering section, Dr. Minho checked his weapon systems for the 100th time. Everything was ready. The plasma lances were charged. The kinetic missiles were loaded. The stealth systems that had kept humanity hidden for 300 years were still holding, but not for much longer. Not once they revealed themselves. The story of humanity's survival was one of desperation and determination. When the great solar flare had struck Earth in 2534, the planet's surface became temporarily uninhabitable. Electromagnetic pulses destroyed most technology. Radiation levels soared. Billions died in the first weeks, but some survived. Deep underground bunkers held millions, and in orbit, a dozen massive colony ships had been under construction as part of humanity's first attempt at interstellar colonization. Those ships, barely finished, became lifeboats. 15 million humans fled Earth on those generation ships, heading into the unknown darkness beyond charted space. They didn't have a destination. They just needed to survive until Earth could heal. The journey was supposed to take 50 years. It took 300. In that time, humanity learned to live in the void. They mined asteroids and rogue star systems that existed between the galaxies. They built new ships from salvage materials. Children were born and died without ever setting foot on a planet. They adapted, they evolved, and they waited. All the while, they watched. Long-range sensors picked up galactic communications. Humanity learned about the Galactic Council, about the empire of species that ruled the known galaxy with an iron fist. They learned that Earth had been declared dead and humanity extinct. Tae Yang had been born on one of those colony ships. His great-great-grandmother had walked on Earth before the flare. She had told stories to her children, who told stories to their children, passing down the memory of blue skies and green forests and oceans that stretched to the horizon. "Humanity does not forget," his grandmother had told him when he was a boy, "and humanity does not forgive those who steal from us." Now 47 warships and 200 support vessels hung invisible in the darkness beyond the solar system's edge. They were smaller than council vessels, but they were faster, meaner, and built by people who had nothing to lose. "Sir," Hana called out, "the council has reached a decision. They're authorizing the mining operations. First ships will arrive at Earth within the week." Tae Yang nodded slowly. He touched the communication panel on his command chair. "All ships, this is Commander Tae Yang. Prepare for combat operations. We're going home." Throughout the fleet, humans moved to their stations. Sergeant Daewon assembled his zero-G combat teams in the launching bays. Engineer Minji powered up the ancient generation ships one last time, their fusion reactors humming to life after decades of minimal operation. Admiral Kyung, the oldest human alive at 120 years old, stood on the bridge of the fleet carrier Remembrance and felt her heart beat faster. They had waited so long for this moment. The council meeting was ending. The various ambassadors were congratulating themselves on a fair division of resources. They would make fortunes from Earth's corpse. Then something appeared on their sensors. A small ship, Vesh design, on patrol near the outer system. It had detected an anomaly. Something large moving through space where nothing should be. The patrol ship moved to investigate. Its sensors reached out, trying to pierce whatever was causing the distortion. Tai Yang gave a simple order. Captain Jiwoo. Show them we're not extinct, Jiwoo smiled. It was not a kind smile. Dropping stealth, she announced. All weapons hot. Time to make an entrance. The Indomitable materialized out of nothing right in front of the Vesh patrol ship. For a moment, both vessels simply stared at each other across the void. Then Jiwoo opened a channel on every frequency used by the Galactic Council. Her voice, translated into a dozen languages, echoed across space. This is Captain Jiwoo of the Human Defense Fleet. You are in our territory. This is your only warning. Leave. Now. The Vesh ship tried to send a distress signal. It tried to run. It tried to fight. It never got the chance to do any of those things. The Indomitable's plasma lances turned the patrol ship into expanding clouds of gas and debris in less than 3 seconds, and then the rest of the human fleet dropped their stealth systems. 47 warships appeared like ghosts materializing from darkness. They spread out across the solar system, taking up defensive positions around Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt. On the council station, alarms started screaming. Sensors that had shown nothing but empty space suddenly showed an entire fleet. A human fleet. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted in a dozen different languages. The Dravix ambassador's scales turned pale with shock. The Vesh representative's antennae trembled with confusion and fear. Impossible, the Dravix ambassador hissed. Humans are extinct. This is some trick. Taeyang's face appeared on every screen in the council chamber. His expression was cold and hard as steel. We are not extinct, he said quietly. We are not gone. We are not forgotten. And Earth is not yours to take. You have 72 hours to remove all claims to the Sol system. After that, anyone who remains will be considered an invader. And we will respond accordingly. The transmission ended. The council chamber fell silent. For 300 years, humanity had been dismissed as a failed species. A cautionary tale about the dangers of depending on a single planet. But Commander Taeyang and his fleet were about to teach the galaxy a very important lesson. You could knock humanity down. You could nearly destroy them. You could take everything they had. But you could never ever make them surrender. And you definitely shouldn't try to steal their home while they were still alive to defend it. The war for Earth had begun. The Galactic Council convened again just 6 hours after the human fleet revealed itself. This time the mood in the chamber was very different. Fear hung in the air like smoke. We destroyed their ship without warning, the Vesh representative chittered nervously. That was an act of war. We must respond with overwhelming force to show them the price of defiance. Admiral Kyung watched the council meeting from her command ship. She was old, far older than any human had a right to be. Life extension treatments developed during the long exile had kept her alive, but nothing could erase the lines of grief on her face. She had lost her husband and 2 children to the solar flare 300 years ago. She had spent every day since then preparing for this moment. They still don't understand, she said to her officers. They think we're afraid of their numbers. Commander Taeyang's voice came through the communication system. The Dravix Empire is mobilizing a punishment fleet. 200 ships, maybe more. They're calling it a police action. Kyung smiled grimly. Let them come. The Dravix Empire was the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Their reptilian warriors were feared on every world. Their ships were massive, heavily armored, and equipped with weapons that could crack planets. They had crushed dozens of rebellions over the centuries. They expected to crush humanity in a matter of days. The Dravix fleet entered the solar system 3 days later. 217 warships, each one larger than any human vessel. They came in formation, confident and arrogant, broadcasting demands for humanity's immediate surrender. Captain Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, studying the enemy fleet's movements. She had spent her entire adult life studying warfare, learning from every battle humanity had fought in their long exile. She had learned from ancient Earth military history, from Sun Tzu to Napoleon to modern tactical theory. "They're treating this like a parade," she said. "Tight formation, minimal spacing between ships. They want to intimidate us with their size." "That's a mistake," Sergeant Daywan said from the tactical station. He commanded the Zero-G assault teams, soldiers trained to fight in the vacuum of space without the protection of ships. "Tight formations make beautiful targets." The Dravik's admiral sent one final message before the battle began. His voice was full of contempt. "Humans, you have one chance to avoid extinction. Surrender your ships. Accept status as a client species under Dravik's protection, or we will erase you from existence." Tae Yang's response was broadcast across every channel. "We kneel to no one. We bow to no empire. You want our home? Come and take it." The Battle of the Asteroid Belt began at 0400 hours ship time. The Dravik's fleet advanced into the belt, expecting the humans to meet them in open combat. Instead, the human ships scattered like leaves in a storm, using the asteroids as cover. Dr. Minho had spent decades developing weapons that could give humanity an advantage against larger forces. Now those weapons proved their worth. Human ships fired kinetic missiles that used the asteroids' gravitational fields to accelerate to incredible speeds. When they hit Dravik shields, they punched through like bullets through paper. The Dravik's fleet tried to adapt, spreading out to avoid the ambush tactics. But the asteroid belt was humanity's territory. They knew every rock, every gravity well, every hiding place. Human ships appeared, fired, and vanished again before the enemy could respond. Captain Jiwoo led a squadron of 6 ships in a daring attack on the Dravik's fleet's supply vessels. Without warning, they dropped out of cover and unleashed everything they had. 3 supply ships exploded in brilliant flashes. The others scattered, breaking formation and creating chaos in the enemy ranks. "All ships, press the attack," Admiral Kyung ordered. "Don't give them time to think. Keep them confused and afraid." The battle raged for 6 hours. The Dravik's had superior numbers and firepower, but humanity had something more valuable. They had motivation. Every human in the fleet knew what they were fighting for. Their home, their future, their very right to exist. Sergeant Daywan led his assault team in the most dangerous mission of the battle. While the fleets engaged each other, his team of 30 soldiers launched from the Indomitable in small, fast pods. Their target was the Dravik's flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Scale of Justice. The pods streaked across the battlefield, too small and fast for most sensors to track. Anti-fighter defenses picked off 3 pods, killing 9 soldiers, but the rest made it through. They attached to the flagship's hull like parasites and began cutting their way inside. Daywan had never seen Earth. He had been born on a generation ship, lived his whole life in artificial gravity and recycled air, but his grandmother had told him stories. Stories about forests and rivers and mountains touching the sky. He fought for a world he had never known, but he fought with everything he had. The assault team moved through the Dravik ship like ghosts. They knew the layout from stolen blueprints. They killed efficiently and silently, making their way toward the bridge. Outside, Captain Jiwoo noticed the flagship's weapons had stopped firing. She understood immediately what that meant. "All ships concentrate fire on the Scale of Justice. Shields only, no hull damage. Our people are inside." The human fleet hammered the flagship with electromagnetic pulse weapons, disrupting its systems and making it impossible for the Dravik's to coordinate their defense. Daywan and his team reached the bridge. They blew the sealed door with shape charges and stormed inside. The Dravik's admiral was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in thick armored scales. He roared in fury and drew a plasma blade. The fight was brief and brutal. The admiral killed 4 humans before Daywan put 3 rounds through his skull. As the alien commander fell, Daywan grabbed the ship's communication system. "This is Sergeant Daywan of the Human Defense Fleet. Your admiral is dead. This ship is ours. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Resist and you will die." The Dravik's crew, shocked by their leader's death and the sudden appearance of human soldiers, chose surrender. The battle turned after that. With their flagship captured and their admiral dead, the Dravik's fleet lost cohesion. Some ships continued fighting out of pride or fury. Others tried to retreat. The human fleet chased them down, destroying engines and weapons but offering terms of surrender to any crew that stood down. By the time the fighting ended, The Draviks had lost 73 ships destroyed and 41 captured. The remaining vessels fled the system in disorder. Humanity lost 8 ships and over 300 crew members. Every death hurt, but the victory was undeniable. Captain Jiwoo personally went aboard the captured flagship. She found Sergeant Daewon sitting in the admiral's chair, bleeding from a dozen wounds but still alive. "We did it," he said quietly. "We actually did it." Jiwoo looked at the bodies scattered across the bridge. Human and Draviks alike, all dead for different reasons. "We did," she agreed. "But this is just the beginning." News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than light. The impossible had happened. A tiny human fleet had defeated a Dravik's armada. The species declared extinct had won against one of the galaxy's most powerful empires. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The representatives were no longer dismissive. They were terrified. "They destroyed 73 ships," the Dravik's representative hissed. 73! And they captured 41 more. "Their technology is more advanced than we believed. Their tactics are unlike anything we've seen." "Then we send more ships," the Vesh representative clicked. "We send overwhelming force. We send everything we have." Admiral Kyung listened to the transmission and felt cold satisfaction. They were making the exact mistake she had hoped for. "Commander Taeyang," she said quietly, "activate Protocol Lazarus." Throughout the solar system, weapons platforms that had been dormant for centuries began to wake up. Humanity had not been idle during their 300 years of exile. Every time they had returned to the solar system in secret to check on Earth's recovery, they had left something behind. A missile platform hidden in Saturn's rings, railgun emplacements buried in the Kuiper Belt, automated defense systems disguised as space debris. Now all of those systems came online, waiting silently for the next wave of attackers. The Galactic Council made their decision. They would assemble a grand armada from multiple species. 5,000 ships would enter the Sol system and crush humanity once and for all. No mercy, no surrender. Complete extermination. Commander Taeyang received the intelligence report and nodded slowly. 5,000 ships, he said. Good. When we win against those odds, no one in the galaxy will ever doubt us again. Around him, his officers looked nervous. 5,000 ships seemed impossible to defeat. But Taeyang had spent his entire life preparing for this war. He knew something the Council didn't. Humans were very, very good at surviving impossible odds. And they were even better at making their enemies regret underestimating them. The first battle was won, but the real war was about to begin. The Grand Armada gathered at the edge of Council space, a sight that would have terrified any species in the galaxy. 5,000 warships from a dozen different civilizations united by one goal: destroy humanity. Engineer Minji worked deep in the belly of one of the old generation ships. She was 28 years old and her hands were always stained with oil and coolant. The ship she maintained was over 300 years old, built by desperate humans fleeing a dying world. It should have been a museum piece. Instead, it was still fighting. "Come on," she whispered to the ancient fusion reactor, adjusting power flows by hand because the automated systems had failed decades ago. "Just a little longer. Stay alive a little longer." The reactor hummed, stabilized, and held. Minji allowed herself a tired smile. Just like humanity itself, the old ship refused to die. On the bridge of the Defiance, Commander Taeyang watched the Council Armada approach. 5,000 ships looked like a swarm of insects blotting out the stars. His tactical display showed enemy formations, weapon signatures, and projected attack patterns. "They're not making the same mistakes as the Draviks," Lieutenant Hana observed. "Loose formation, multiple approach vectors, sensor ships staying back out of range. They learned," Taeyang agreed. "Good. I'd be disappointed if they didn't." Admiral Kyung's voice came through on the command channel. "All ships, this is Admiral Kyung. Today we face an enemy that wants to erase us from existence. They come with overwhelming numbers because they believe numbers are all that matter. Let's show them what happens when numbers meet determination." The Council Armada entered the solar system near Jupiter, far from Earth but close enough to use the gas giant for gravitational assist. It was a smart tactical choice. What they didn't know was that humanity had been using Jupiter's orbit for 300 years. The attack began without warning. What appeared to be ordinary space debris floating near Jupiter's moon suddenly came alive. Thousands of automated drones, small and fast, swarmed toward the Council fleet like angry bees. "Defensive fire," the Council Admiral ordered. "Destroy those drones." But there were too many. The drones weren't sophisticated weapons. They were simple kinetic kill vehicles, cheap to make and impossible to avoid when there were thousands of them. They slammed into Council ships at tremendous speed, punching holes in armor and shields. Colonel Sujin watched the battle from Mars, where she commanded the planet's defense garrison. Mars had been humanity's first colony, abandoned after the solar flare but never forgotten. During the long exile, humans had returned in secret and turned the red planet into a fortress. 3,000 soldiers under her command waited in underground bunkers and cave systems. Above them, Council landing ships began their descent. 50,000 enemy troops were coming to take Mars as a staging ground for the assault on Earth. "Let them land," Sujin ordered. She was in her 40s, a thin woman with sharp eyes and scars on her face from a training accident years ago. "Let them think we're weak." The Council troops landed in the lowlands near old colony sites. They deployed in textbook formation, establishing a perimeter and bringing down heavy equipment. They expected resistance. They got nothing. "Sir, there's no one here," a Vesh commander reported to his superior. "The cities are abandoned. No life signs anywhere. They're hiding underground," the superior clicked back. "Find the entrances. Bring them out." That's when Colonel Sujin sprang her trap. The Martian dust storms were legendary, and she had learned to use them as weapons. Hidden generators kicked on, creating artificial static charges that turned the natural storms into raging monsters. Visibility dropped to 0. Communications broke down. The Council forces found themselves blind and isolated. Human soldiers emerged from the caves like ghosts. They knew every rock, every canyon, every hiding place. They struck fast and vanished before the enemy could respond. Council troops fired at shadows and hit their own people. The carefully planned invasion turned into chaos and slaughter. In space, pilot Jae-hyun led his squadron on the most dangerous mission of the war. He was 31 years old, the best pilot in the fleet, and he flew with cold precision that scared even his own wingmen. His wife had been killed in a Dravix raid on one of the supply stations. He carried her picture in his cockpit and fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. His target was the Council's bioships, living vessels grown by the Vesh Collective. They were massive, self-healing, and nearly impossible to kill with conventional weapons. But Jae-hyun had a plan that was just crazy enough to work. "All wings form up," he ordered. "We're going into Saturn's rings." The bioships pursued, confident in their ability to withstand any attack. They were wrong. Jae-hyun led them deep into the ice and rock of Saturn's rings. Then his squadron deployed bombs at precise locations. The explosions were small, but they didn't need to be big. They just needed to be accurate. The ring structure collapsed, billions of tons of ice and rock falling inward. The bioships, massive and slow, couldn't escape in time. They were crushed by the very rings they had been using for cover. Jae-hyun pulled his fighter into a tight turn and watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. "That's for you, my love," he whispered. But the Council had numbers on their side. For every ship humanity destroyed, 2 more took its place. The battle turned into a grinding war of attrition, and attrition was a war humanity couldn't win. Dr. Minho knew this. In his laboratory aboard the Defiance, he worked on humanity's final gamble. The weapon that would either save them or doom them. A relativistic missile carrying a fusion warhead. When it reached 90% the speed of light, it would hit with the force of a small star. The problem was that humanity only had one, and Minho needed to make it count. "Target the Council command carrier," Admiral Kyung ordered. "Kill their leadership and the rest might scatter." The missile launched from a hidden platform in the Kuiper Belt. It accelerated for 3 days, building speed until it was barely detectable. By the time Council sensors picked it up, it was already too late to do anything but watch it come. The command carrier tried to maneuver. It tried to deploy chaff and decoys. It tried everything. The missile hit it dead center. The explosion was visible from Earth. The massive carrier simply ceased to exist, converted into plasma and radiation. 3,000 Council officers and crew died instantly, including 5 admirals and the supreme commander of the Armada. Panic rippled through the Council fleet. Without central command, without clear orders, ships began to make their own decisions. Some continued fighting, some tried to retreat. The unified Armada broke into a confused mob. Commander Tae Yang saw his opportunity. All ships broadcast on every channel. Tell them they can leave now and live or stay and die. The broadcast went out in a dozen languages. This is Commander Taeyang of the Human Defense Fleet. Your leaders are dead. Your command structure is destroyed. We do not want to kill you, but we will if you force us. Leave our system now. You have 1 hour. 2,000 ships took the offer. They broke formation and fled toward the edge of the system, engines burning at maximum power. 3,000 remained, either too proud to run or too committed to their orders. So be it, Admiral Kyung said quietly. Activate all defensive platforms. It's time to show them Earth's true defense. Throughout the solar system, the weapons platforms of Protocol Lazarus came fully online. Railguns hidden in asteroids began firing. Missile batteries buried in moons launched their payloads. Even the ancient generation ships, barely holding together, fired their last weapons. But the greatest surprise was still to come. As the Council fleet advanced toward Earth, the planet itself came alive. Ocean surfaces split open, revealing massive railgun emplacements. Mountains moved aside to show missile silos. The orbital space around Earth filled with defensive satellites that had been dormant for 3 centuries. Earth had never been abandoned. Humanity had just made everyone think it was. General Hyo Sun stood in the command center beneath what used to be the Pacific Ocean. She was ancient, kept alive by medical technology that was barely understood anymore. She had been born on Earth before the solar flare. She had been a young woman when the evacuation happened, and she had refused to leave. For 300 years she had lived underground with a small community of humans who stayed behind. They had maintained the defensive systems. They had kept the hope alive. And now finally their patience was rewarded. All batteries fire at will, she ordered. Protect our home. The battle for Earth's orbit was the bloodiest engagement of the war. Council ships pushed forward, taking terrible losses but refusing to break. Human defensive fire was devastating, but there were simply too many targets. Captain Jiwoo saw that the line was breaking, and the Council was going to punch through to Earth's surface. She made a decision that she knew would be her last. This is Captain Jiwoo to all ships. The Indomitable is making a final run. It's been an honor. Before anyone could countermand the order, Jiwoo pointed her ship at the largest Dravix dreadnought still in the fight, the one carrying the Emperor himself, come to personally witness humanity's destruction. The Indomitable accelerated to ramming speed. Point defense systems tore into the ship, killing crew and shredding armor, but momentum carried it forward. The Council forces that remained in the Sol system were trapped between their pride and their fear. They had come to exterminate humanity. Instead, they were being exterminated. But retreat meant dishonor, and dishonor meant death back home. So they fought on, desperate and vicious. General Hyo-sun walked through the underground command center, her footsteps echoing on metal floors that had been silent for centuries. She was impossibly old now, 347 years, kept alive by technology that was more prayer than science. Her body ached, but her mind was sharp as ever. Status report, she commanded. Commander Sung-ho, leader of the Pacific Defense Grid, looked up from his console. He was 50 years old, born underground and raised on stories of a sky he had never seen until today. Council ground forces are attempting planetary assault. 200 landing ships inbound. They'll reach the surface in 30 minutes. Hyo-sun nodded slowly. Let them come. We've waited 300 years to defend our home. 30 more minutes won't hurt. High above, in orbit, the Council landing ships pushed through the defensive fire. They were heavily armored transports, designed to survive the worst that planetary defense could throw at them. 43 ships burned and died in the atmosphere, but the rest made it through. They landed in what used to be North America, on plains that had once held cities of millions. Now the land was green again, forests reclaiming the urban ruins. The Council troops deployed expecting resistance. Instead, they found themselves in a maze of ancient highways and collapsed buildings, perfect terrain for ambush. Specialist Yuna sat in a bunker in what used to be called Tokyo. She was 23 years old, a genius with computers who had grown up learning ancient hacking techniques. Now she was putting those skills to deadly use. I'm into their network, she reported. Their ships are using standard Council protocols. No military-grade encryption. They didn't expect anyone to fight back. Can you take control? Hyo-sun asked. Yuna's fingers danced across holographic keyboards. Watch this. In orbit, chaos erupted among the Council fleet. Ships suddenly found their targeting systems offline. Navigation computers showed false data. Friend or foe identification systems malfunctioned, causing ships to fire on their own allies. A virus spread through the fleet network like wildfire, and Yuna was the match that lit it. On the ground, Council troops advanced cautiously through the ruins. They were professionals, well-trained and well-equipped, but they were fighting on unfamiliar terrain against an enemy who knew every stone. Human defenders emerged from underground tunnels. They struck from old sewers and subway systems. They fired from buildings and vanished before the return fire came. The Council troops found themselves fighting ghosts, bleeding from 1,000 small cuts. Sergeant Daewon led his Zero-G assault team in a ground operation for the first time. They moved through the ruins like shadows, their training making them deadly even in normal gravity. Daewon himself killed 17 enemy soldiers in the first hour of fighting, moving with the efficiency of a machine. They're falling back, one of his team reported, regrouping near their landing zone. Push them, Daewon ordered. Don't give them time to think. Keep them scared. In space, the battle continued with savage intensity. Commander Tai Yang coordinated the defense from the Defiance, but he was exhausted. 3 days of constant combat with no sleep. He ran on stimulants and pure determination. Sir, you need to rest, Lieutenant Hana urged. You're making mistakes. I'll rest when they're dead or gone, Tai Yang replied. Not before. The Council tried one last major push, throwing everything they had at Earth's orbital defenses. It was a move born of desperation. If they could break through, establish orbital superiority, they could bombard the planet and force humanity to surrender. They never got the chance. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, met them head-on. And then something happened that changed everything. The Indomitable was gone, destroyed in Captain Jiwoo's final sacrifice. But her death had inspired the entire fleet. Now her executive officer, Commander Bora, led the surviving crew in a ship that barely held together. Half the systems were dead. The hull was breached in a dozen places, but the weapons still worked. This is Commander Bora to all ships. The captain gave her life for Earth. We're going to make sure that sacrifice meant something. All remaining ships, form up on me. We're going to punch through their lines and take the fight to their carriers. It was a suicide mission, everyone knew it. No one cared. 23 ships, all damaged, all running on minimal power, charged directly at the heart of the Council fleet. Dr. Minho watched from the Defiance and felt tears on his face. They're all going to die. No, Admiral Kyung said quietly. They're all going to win. The charge broke the Council line. The 23 ships, firing everything they had, created a corridor of destruction through the enemy formation. Council ships tried to close the gap, but human point defense fire kept them back. The corridor stayed open just long enough. All ships, through the gap, Tai Yang ordered. Follow them in. The entire human fleet poured through the breach. They reached the Council carrier group, the massive ships that held thousands of troops and hundreds of fighter craft. And they tore into them with controlled fury. Commander Bora's ship died first, cut apart by carrier defense lasers. But not before she had launched every missile she had left. 13 more ships followed her into death, but the carriers were crippled. Without the carriers, the Council had no logistics, no resupply, no way to sustain a long campaign. On Earth's surface, General Hyo Sun felt the shift in the battle. The orbital bombardment that she had feared never came. The Council troops on the ground, already demoralized, learned that their supply ships were destroyed. They were trapped on a hostile world with no way home. Commander Sung Ho's voice was calm as he broadcast to the enemy forces. This is Commander Sung Ho of Earth Defense. Your fleet is broken. Your carriers are destroyed. You are trapped here. Surrender now, and you will be treated as prisoners of war. Continue fighting, and you will die on soil that is not yours. Some surrendered. Others chose to fight to the end. By the time the sun set on the battlefield, 16,000 Council troops had died. Another 24,000 were prisoners. The cost to humanity was 4,000 defenders dead. but they had held their home. In space, the surviving Council ships finally broke and ran. They jumped out of the system any way they could, abandoning their ground forces, abandoning their wounded, abandoning any pretense of victory. They had come to destroy humanity. Instead, they had been destroyed. Admiral Kyung sat in her command chair, watching the enemy flee. She was dying. She had known it for days. A piece of shrapnel had lodged near her heart during one of the early battles. Medical staff wanted to operate, but she had refused. She needed to see this through first. "Commander Tae-young," she said softly, "you have command of the fleet. Finish this war. Make sure they never come back." "Admiral, you need medical attention," Tae-young protested. "What I need is to see the sky," Kyung replied. "Take me down to Earth. Let me die on the world I spent my whole life protecting." They brought her down in a medical shuttle, landing in what used to be called Seoul. The city was ruins and forest now, nature reclaiming what humanity had built. They carried Kyung out on a stretcher and set her on a hill overlooking the Han River. General Hyo-sun came to meet her. Two old women who had spent centuries preparing for war finally seeing peace. "We did it," Hyo-sun said. "We did," Kyung agreed. She looked up at the sky. It was blue and clear, with only a few clouds. No enemy ships, no weapons fire, just blue sky and freedom. "I never thought I'd see this." She died there, on that hill, with the sky she had fought for above her and the soil of Earth beneath her. Her last words were simple. "We won. The war was over. The Council was defeated. Earth was free." But Commander Tae-yang knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had learned that humanity existed and that humanity could fight. Some species would respect that. Others would fear it, and fear often led to more violence. Specialist Yuna discovered something in the captured Council communications. Other species, smaller ones without military power, had been sending secret messages to humanity during the battle. Messages of support, messages of hope. "They want us to help them," Yuna reported. "Dozens of species, all oppressed by the Council. They're asking if we'll stand with them." Tae-yang looked at the messages, at the desperate pleas from beings across the galaxy. He thought of Admiral Kyung, dying to see Earth free. He thought of Captain Jiwoo, who gave her life to protect their home. He thought of all the humans who had survived 3 centuries in the void because they refused to give up. "Send a response," he said finally. "Tell them that humanity does not kneel to tyrants, and we will not stand by while others are forced to kneel either. Tell them we're coming." Lieutenant Hana smiled. "Sir, you're starting a revolution." "No," Tae-yang corrected. "I'm finishing one. The Council has ruled through fear for too long. It's time someone reminded the galaxy what freedom looks like." On Mars, Colonel Soo-jin walked across the battlefield, looking at the cost of victory. Her soldiers had held against impossible odds, but the price was high. She knelt beside one of her fallen troops, a young man who would never see his 25th birthday. 6 months after the war ended, Commander Tae-yang stood in what used to be the United Nations building in New York. The structure was mostly ruins, but humanity was rebuilding it as a symbol. From ashes and destruction, something new would rise. He was Grand Admiral now, promoted by unanimous vote of the surviving fleet commanders. The title felt heavy. He had led them in war, but peace was proving harder to navigate than any battle. "The latest reports from our scouts," Lieutenant Hana said, entering the makeshift office. She wore an admiral's insignia now, too. The youngest flag officer in human history. 17 species have formally requested alliance with humanity. The Council is fragmenting. 3 member species have declared independence. Tae-yang rubbed his tired eyes. And the Dravix Empire? Silent. After we sent back their prisoners, they withdrew to their home systems. Our intelligence suggests they're dealing with internal rebellions. Turns out losing an emperor and most of their fleet didn't do wonders for political stability. A small smile crossed Tae-yang's face. The Dravix had called humans cosmic vermin. Now they were too busy with their own problems to threaten anyone. On Mars, Colonel Soo-jin oversaw the transformation of the Red Planet from military fortress to living colony. Thousands of people were coming up from Earth, ready to start new lives. The underground warrens that had housed her garrison were being converted to civilian habitats. "It's strange," she said to one of her officers. "We spent so long preparing for war. Now we have to learn how to build instead of destroy." Her officer, a young woman named Yunji, smiled. "That's the better problem to have, Colonel." Sujin nodded. She was tired of war. Mars could be beautiful if they let it. Terraforming would take generations. But humanity had proven they were good at long-term projects. Sergeant Daewon had retired from military service the day after the war ended. He had fought his entire adult life for a world he had never seen. Now he lived in a small cabin in what used to be called Canada, near mountains and forests. He spent his days learning to farm, to fish, to simply exist without combat. Sometimes at night he still dreamed of the battles, of the soldiers who had died under his command. But when he woke up, he could step outside and see stars without fear. That made the nightmares worth it. Dr. Minho had shifted his genius from weapons to terraforming technology. His new project was atmospheric processors that could help Earth heal faster from the old solar flare damage. The planet was recovering naturally, but Minho wanted to speed the process. "We spent 300 years learning to destroy efficiently," he told his research team. "Now we spend the next 300 learning to build better." Pilot. Jae-hyun opened a flight academy in what used to be called South Korea. He taught young pilots the skills that had kept him alive through the war. His students called him Master Jae-hyun, but he insisted they just use his name. On the wall of his office hung a picture of his wife and a memorial to all the pilots who had died in the war. He made sure every student saw it and understood the cost of the freedom they now enjoyed. "Never forget what was sacrificed," he told each graduating class, "and never take for granted the peace others died to give you." Engineer Minji worked on converting the old generation ships into permanent space habitats. These ancient vessels had carried humanity through centuries of exile. Now they would become orbiting cities, museums, and research stations. She wanted to make sure they were never forgotten. "These ships saved us," she said to anyone who would listen. "They deserve to be honored, not scrapped." General Hyosun lived long enough to see Earth truly free. She walked through the forests growing over old cities and smiled at the children playing in parks. At 347 years old, she was ready to rest. She died peacefully in her sleep, and humanity gave her a hero's funeral. They buried her on the hill where Admiral Kyung had died, overlooking the river and the sky they had both fought to protect. Specialist Yuna became head of humanity's intelligence network. Her cyber warfare skills had helped win the war, and now she used them to keep humanity safe. She monitored galactic communications, tracked potential threats, and made sure humanity would never be caught off guard again. "Trust, but verify," she told her team, "and keep our defenses ready. Peace is wonderful, but it's fragile." The Galactic Council, or what remained of it, tried to negotiate with humanity. They sent ambassadors with offers of trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. They spoke of putting the past behind them and moving forward together. Grand Admiral Tae Yang listened to their proposals in the old UN building, surrounded by human advisors and representatives from the species that had allied with humanity. "You tried to exterminate us," he said calmly to the council ambassador. "You declared our world salvage and prepared to strip mine our home. Why should we trust you now?" The ambassador, a being that looked like a floating jellyfish, pulsed with embarrassed colors. "We made mistakes. We underestimated you. We propose forming a new organization, a true federation of equals, where all species have voice regardless of their size or military power." Admiral Hana, sitting beside Tae Yang, leaned in to whisper, "Sounds good in theory, but can we trust them to follow through?" "No," Tae Yang whispered back, "but we can make sure they do." He turned back to the ambassador. "We will consider your proposal, but understand this. Humanity will never again be ignored or dismissed. We will defend not just ourselves, but any species that faces the kind of extinction you tried to inflict on us. If this new federation is real, if it truly represents equality and freedom, then you'll have our support. But if it's just the old council with a new name, you'll have our opposition." The ambassador agreed hastily. The new alliance, called the Free Species Coalition, was formed 3 months later. Humanity became one of its founding members, along with 17 species that had been oppressed under the old council's rule. But peace never lasts forever. 6 months into the new alliance, sensors detected something emerging from deep space. Ships of a design no one recognized, made from materials that seemed almost alive. They weren't council species. They were something else. Something that made the council look benign. The first world they hit was a mining colony on the galactic rim. They stripped it bare in hours, taking every resource and leaving the planet a dead rock. Then they moved on to the next system. The distress calls reached Earth within days. Species that had barely finished signing peace treaties were now begging for help against a new threat. Grand Admiral Tai Yang stood in the command center, watching tactical displays of the unknown enemy. They moved fast, hit hard, and showed no interest in communication or negotiation. They were just taking what they wanted. "How many ships can we mobilize?" he asked. 87 warships ready for immediate deployment, Admiral Hana reported. Another 112 in various stages of construction. "We've been building steadily since the war ended." Tai Yang nodded. Humanity had learned its lesson. Never be unprepared. Never be weak. Always be ready. Send a message to the coalition, he ordered. Humanity is mobilizing to face this threat. Any species that wants to stand with us is welcome. Any species that doesn't, we understand. But we're going to protect those who can't protect themselves. The response was overwhelming. 23 species contributed ships to the defensive fleet. They weren't as advanced as human vessels, but they were willing to fight. That mattered. Colonel Su Jin, called back to service despite her desire for peace, led the Marine contingent. Sergeant Daewon came out of retirement to train special forces. Dr. Minho returned to weapons development, though it hurt his heart to do so. Pilot Jae-hyun closed his academy temporarily and rejoined the fighter corps. Engineer Minji prepared the old generation ships one more time. They were museums now, but they could fight if they had to. Everything humanity had built could be a weapon if the situation demanded it. The combined fleet, 500 ships strong, moved to intercept the unknown threat. Grand Admiral Tai Yang commanded from the Defiance, now rebuilt and upgraded with the best technology the coalition could provide. As they approached the enemy, Tai Yang thought about everything humanity had endured: 300 years of exile, a war against impossible odds, the loss of so many good people, and now this, a new threat that could undo everything they had built. But he wasn't afraid. Humanity had survived the solar flare. They had survived the exile. They had survived the Council's attempt at extermination. They would survive this too. "All ships, this is Grand Admiral Tai Yang," he broadcast across the fleet. "We didn't choose to be warriors. We didn't want this fight. But when the galaxy threatened our home, we showed them what humanity could do. Now they threaten species under our protection. Time to show them again." The fleet moved forward as one. Humans and aliens, former enemies and new allies, united against a common threat. Far below on Earth, children played in parks. Couples walked through rebuilt cities. Farmers tended crops in soil that was finally clean and healthy. They lived their lives in peace because others stood guard in the darkness between stars. General Hyo Sun had once said that humanity's greatest strength was not giving up. Admiral Kyung had died seeing the sky free of enemies. Captain Ji Woo had sacrificed herself so others could live.